I have been on a journey to be someone. And along the way, I learned the secrets. It's your friends, the people you choose to spend time with. My life, health, and wealth have been changed forever by the people around me. And now it's time for you to meet my friends. This is the Be Someone podcast with Michael Hoang. All right, welcome to another episode of the Be Someone podcast. I'm Michael Hoang, and today I'm here with Keith Gillispie. Did I say it right?
Almost Gillispie.
Oh, you even told me before we started the show how to say it. I
That's
still
okay.
messed it up.
You're a good dude.
Anyway, Keith has an interesting story. I've loved getting to know Keith. We've met each other at other networking events in the past, and Keith has an interesting background from serving in the military to really scaling a real estate company. So, Keith, do you want to give a little intro about yourself?
Dude, yeah. First, thanks for having me. I super appreciate it, and I'm so excited to get into it today. Quick synopsis. Yeah, I started in 2016, and I grew up in a really small town, really, really poor, well below the poverty level. And when I joined the Marine Corps, it was more money than I had ever seen in my entire life. And I was super fiscally responsible. I was making more money as a private than my mom was actually in California, living in California. So I was like, gosh, I've got this budget. I'm really rigorous. I'm saving my money. My squad leader was like, hey, Keith, I'm reading this book on finances. It kind of changed my life. And I think that you should read it. And he gave me Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I read that in 2016. And immediately, the very next month, we got started. We started a corporation and we started investing in a lot of programs. I've gone through 57 courses, mentorships, apprenticeships, whatever you want to call it, 57 so far in the last 9 years. And anyway, so I'm going to just go super, super fast. Went from being stationed in Southern Virginia to Washington, D.C. to Hawaii. The whole time I'm in different countries. Yeah, I'm stationed in these places, but I'm going to all these different countries, 10, 15 countries per year. And I was always gone. But from 2016 until when I got out in 2020, I was flipping houses nationwide. And so now I've done deals. We invest actively in 34 states, and I do absolutely everything virtually. I have a small team of 4 people, and we're all about efficiency and effectiveness.
Wow, that is an amazing synopsis there. You went through a lot very fast. You
Yeah.
were right there. Yeah, Rich Dad Poor Dad was the first book I read. We call it the Purple Bible. I have like an original copy on the shelf
Yeah,
behind me
that's
there.
cool.
Yeah, that really hooked me too. So what I guess you kind of answered the question, but what made you originally interested in real estate? Like who or what got you into it? I guess reading
Easy.
Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah, it was Rich Dad Poor Dad, but I would like to think of myself as like a young scholar. I love reading books. I'm always reading a book. I've read probably couple thousand books, and so what made Rich Dad Poor Dad special was I'm a little bit nerdy when it comes to like numbers, and I just started getting into like the statistical probability of becoming extremely wealthy in real estate. And I said, man, this may be my exit. So I'll go a little bit deeper into this. At the time, 2016, me and my wife, we got pregnant with our first child. And I was overseas. I don't remember. I think I was in Europe at the time. And she didn't tell me. She didn't want to tell me over Skype or a text message. And so she kept it a secret until I got back home. So like literally imagine I'm coming home, sea bags in hand. She opens the door. Surprise, we're pregnant. And I am like, oh my goodness, like I was not expecting this, right? She recorded the whole thing. It's up on YouTube if you want to watch it.
Oh
And
wow.
then, kid you not, a year and a half later, I'm in China or some I think it was China. I come back and again, we're pregnant. And she kept it from me. Sea bags in hand, recorded the same exact way, opened the door, and she surprises me with the pregnancy thing. Fast forward over the next 2 years, I'm constantly leaving to go to these different countries and I'm coming back and my wife is having to reintroduce me to my children because they never saw me. They didn't recognize me. I was never
Whoa.
home. And so I realized like this was kind of a painful experience for me for the first 4 years. And we're just going to get really real, really fast. My dad died when I was 8 years old. So I grew up without a father. And here I am now. My children are not being raised by their father for their first 4 years of their life. But I don't have the excuse of being dead, right? I'm choosing this lifestyle. I'm choosing to not rear my children. And I needed a lifestyle change very quickly. I absolutely love the Marine Corps. I'm very proud to serve. I was in for 8 years. I will never say a bad thing about it. But it was a season of time for me. It was a season of my life, and it was unsustainable if I wanted to have the impact in rearing my children as I wanted to. And so I needed to get out. And so that's what it was. Yes, we started Rich Dad Poor Dad, but there were some very deep underlying reasons why I got into real estate. And it was ultimately because this was the exit out of the Marine Corps for me.
Wow, that is really powerful. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for your service.
Yeah, absolutely,
Um,
man.
I had a similar motivating factor. It wasn't as I don't have kids yet, so it wasn't as powerful as my children don't know me when I come home from work.
Yeah.
But I was traveling Monday through Friday every single week for 8 years straight. I would fly from Houston, where I live, to another city, and I would come home. And I was only home on weekends and holidays for 8 years.
Wow.
And that was a big motivating factor for me to get into real estate, because I was like, man, this is not sustainable. It was a good job,
Yeah.
and it
Yeah.
was a good life I was living. I was eating at nice restaurants and staying in nice hotels, and but it was like, man, I can't raise a family doing this, only home
That's
on the
right.
weekends. So that was a big motivation for me. I mean, I wasn't in China being reintroduced to my children, but it was still
Yeah.
that was a big part of my why. And so
Yeah.
you kind of answered. I was going to ask you what your why is, and you kind of answered that for me.
Yeah.
Um,
I need to be home.
so yeah. Um, so can you tell me about your first deal? Like how you found your first deal?
Well, first deal was the only deal. It was the first and the last deal that I ever found on market. And essentially, it was a short sale. It took us, I think, 14 months to go through this horribly long process of a short sale negotiation with the bank. We finally got it under contract, and we ended up purchasing it. It was intended to be a flip where we were going to we call it pop the top, where we just add a second story on the existing footprint of the house. I don't know why we thought that was a good idea for our very first project, but that's what we were going to do. And I had no idea what I was doing, dude. I was lost in the sauce. I had good people in my corner. I had been relatively trained, as I had already mentioned. We had gone through several real estate investing courses and such, some big names too that are really good education. And so I was like, hey, I'm going in the deep end. Like we're jumping in. There's no like dipping your big toe in the water. And the problem was I didn't do my due diligence at all. And lo and behold, when you're putting a second story on a house, you should do things like a soil density test to make sure that the soil underneath the house is going to support the extra weight of tens of thousands of pounds. Did not do such a thing, and found out later, hey, you can't do that. So my ARV that I thought was going to be huge ended up being way lower. And legit, we were supposed to make more than six figures, and literally my check at closing was exactly $2,000.00. So
Could have been a lot worse, man. Could have been a
it
lot worse.
was a flop when it compares to, I think our net profit was supposed to be like 130 or 140. But exactly what you just said. I didn't have to pay for my learning lesson.
Oh, it's fine, man. Soil is soil. You could build a skyscraper on the same patch of dirt. Don't be ridiculous. But
Oh
wow,
gosh.
that was a heck of an education there.
Yes, it was.
Yeah,
So needless to say, we have a pretty robust due diligence process. Now, before I actually take title to a house, we make sure that all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed. We know what the heck we're doing before we buy it.
yeah, I've met someone who did, what does he call it, pop tops or whatever. They
Yeah.
find these ranches, and they ranch style homes, and they put a second story on them, and
Yeah.
that's all he does. I
Dude,
think
it's a
he's out of
great business model.
Yeah, I think he's out of a PA, out of Philadelphia or something like that, and
Okay.
somewhere in the Northeast, and that's
Yeah.
all he does. I think his name is something De Silva. I forget the guy, but I met him through the Bigger Pockets world, and
Okay.
all he did for years was that, but he specialized in it, and he
Dude,
got
it's really cool because you ask yourself a lot of times when we're flipping houses, we'll ask ourselves, what is the highest and best use of of this house, but we constrain ourselves. We put ourselves in this box of leaving it as its original configuration, meaning if it's a 2-2 or if it's a 3-1, leaving it as a 3-1. And in today's modern age, a 2-2 single family house is not typically the best configuration. It is not the highest and best use of a single family house. And so you already have the footprint. If you're able to build on top of it, you can quite literally double the ARV and only have to put in about $100,000 to a house. And so if you're able to buy it for 100, put in 100, and then sell it for $500,000, you've just cleared 200,000 simply because you thought outside the box that every other investor is going to constrain themselves to, of what is the highest and best use outside of the original or existing configuration of the layout.
Wow, that is some margin. I didn't know you were playing with those kind of numbers. That is
Yeah.
impressive. So
Yeah.
when you do, are you still doing those kind of deals now?
Heck no.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions about them though. Do you have to get an engineer involved with that? Do you have to get a PE to stamp off or do blueprints for you or something?
Yes. So yes to all of the above. So quite literally, that was the very last. It was the first time that we did that, and it was the last time that we did that. It was a
Oh,
huge
I see.
learning lesson of don't do. I personally don't do this anymore. But yes, we had to bring in an engineer. Yes, we had to recreate blueprints, and it was all for naught. Like literally, all the blueprints that we had drawn up, we had what's it called, like CGI configurations of what the house is going to look like,
Oh man.
and all of it gone, wiped out. Our
Wow.
house looked fantastic when we were done with it, and we had all of the money to do this huge, basically new build on top of the house,
Mhm.
and we ended up retailing it to the nines. I mean, we absolutely we were the highest comp in that zip code. It was fantastic. It's a beautiful house, but
Yeah.
we couldn't do the things that we wanted to do. The engineer was like, actually, I think it was the engineer originally who said, I don't, you need to bring in a soil density guy you stick like a 8-foot rod in the ground. I don't even know to this day what they do. They stick a rod in the ground and like it reverberates or something like that. And it
Uh-huh.
sends him back a report. And he was like, yeah, there's nothing that we can do. Realistically, it's not safe to do this unless we were to lift the house, redo the foundation by putting in 8-foot pillars, pylons, or whatever they're called. You screw them into the ground, they go 8 feet deep. We could have done that, but that would have blown our budget and ended up not being worth it.
Right. Yeah.
So
I've seen a little bit of that. I used to in one of the corporate jobs I had in the past, we would go out and do services to wind farms, and I've seen engineers go out there and do soil testing, and they have these gadgets and gizmos, and
yeah,
we don't know what they do either, but they come back and give us a report says good to go, or they come back and
yeah,
give us a report and say it's going to be very expensive to
very
continue.
expensive. Don't do
Yeah.
this. Yeah.
Yeah, and so did you have a mentor or somebody guiding you on that specific strategy of like pop top?
No.
Okay.
At the time, we did have a unofficial business partner. She was a member of our church. She was a realtor and she was an investor. We're still great friends to this day.
Hmm.
But she had never done that either. There was no book, there was no course, there was no mentor. We were just winging it. And we had got it for a stupid good price. I don't actually remember the price of this, but there was a humongous margin
Would you have
on
made money on that one if you just cleaned it up and brought it up to the level of the neighborhood's comps and just sold it?
100%. And that's what we ended up doing. But because it was my mistake, I took the fall for the lack of, it was unrealized gains. It was potential profit that we missed out on, and gave my partner the lion's share of the net profitability of that house, of that deal. And that's why I walked away with a check for 2,000.
I see. Okay. And so starting over now, I think what would you have done differently on your first deal knowing what you know now?
Yeah, I have a mentor that actually knows what the heck they're doing, what they're getting into.
Somebody who does whatever your strategy is routinely and like has
Yeah,
a process down, right?
that's exactly right. Having an SOP put in place, like having a process, having a system, so that we're not winging it, and it was just overwhelming, frankly. all of this research and stuff that we had to do, we needed a process, and that would have saved so much stress and headaches that came of that deal.
Yeah, I found the same thing to be true. Like when you're in the middle of a deal and the shot clock is ticking, you don't need to like figure out what to do on the fly. You need to already have a blueprint handed to you. And that's why
Yeah.
it's important. Like for me, I've had many mentors in my life for single family, multifamily, for marketing, and for life in general. And it's like when I do something, I am not trying to reinvent the wheel. I want someone to hand me the blueprint, and I want to take off running.
Yep.
Because some things could take you a week to figure out, and if you're rehabbing a house, that's an expensive week, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're in the thick of a deal, man, you really got to know what you're doing, and so you need to either have done it multiple times, or you got to have a mentor, a partner, your network, something like that that can
Yeah.
help you execute.
Start off with a
But
template and then tweak it as you see fit. Make it your own baby. Put your own style or spin on it. But yeah,
that's right.
starting off with a plan.
That's right. And then I was going to ask, how did you fund that first deal? Was it self-funded?
No, private money. We just raised private money from
Private
people
money. Love it.
close to us. Yeah.
And how did you find private money?
Um, gosh, the lady that we partnered with, she brought the majority of what we needed for the purchase, maybe about 60% or so of what we needed to purchase. I think she brought about $60,000. But then the rest of it, which was about 160, 180, again, this is 9 years ago. I'm not great with numbers, but it was just a pretty substantial amount, came from people in the church that we went to, ironically.
Oh,
They
wow.
knew what she did, and they knew what I was doing. I have a really big mouth, and everybody knows what I do. And so I was like, "Hey, we're doing this deal. This is an amazing deal. Check out these numbers. Here's our plan for it." Gave them the whole pitch, and came with a bunch of pre-work. Here's the ARV. Here's the repairs. We already have 3 contractor bids. We already have CMAs. We have an appraisal. Here's the scope of work. It's already outlined. Like we had the plan put
Mhm.
in place. And so it's really easy to pitch private money when really you do your pre-work and you're coming to them. I kind of go at this with applying the golden rule, and it's not the typical golden rule that we do unto others as you want them to do unto you. The golden rule in business is he who has the gold makes the rules. And so when you're going to somebody to raise private money, if you're going to be borrowing hundreds of thousands of dollars from them, make sure that you're showing up completely prepared. And honestly, it's my opinion that when you you collect all of this information. Here's the ARV, but don't trust me. Here's 3 CMAs and an appraisal. Here's the repair estimate, but don't trust me. Here's 100 pictures, a video walkthrough. Here's the scope of work. Here's 3 contractor bids. Here's the deal analysis. We've already pulled title. We already have the title commitment signed by the title company. Here's everything that you need. Public record, yada, yada, yada. We're going to collect all of that. We're going to gather all of it, put it into a Google Drive, have a summary page that we call a property portfolio summary page, and email it to them. Here's my opinion. If you give them all that information and they have to ask even one question, you didn't do your job right. They should be able to look through all of that information in somewhere between 20 and 60 minutes, depending on how deep they want to dig into your research. And you already have 3 verification points on everything. If they want to quadruple verify your ARV or quadruple verify, it may take a little bit longer, maybe take an hour or so. But realistically, after an hour of you sending them that email, they should be able to tell you, yay or nay, I'm good for this deal.
And did you pre-record like a presentation and give it to them, or did you do it live?
No, I did everything live. I still do everything live, actually,
That's awesome. That's
even
awesome.
when I'm raising private money.
How
And
many invest? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
um, actually, go ahead and ask your question because I think it'll play into what I'm about to say.
Okay. How many investors did you have in that first deal? How many private lenders?
That's not what I thought you were going to ask, but that's okay. We only had one. We had one investor, but at this point, I have like 100 people, more than 100 people that I have raised private money from. Now, admittedly, I have not used that 100 people. I've only used maybe about 20 or 25 of them. All the rest I've collected all their information and such, but I've never actually used them because I don't have that many deals. I have way more private money than I have deals. I could never use this amount of money,
Yeah,
at least not at our current capacity.
yeah, I like to tell people the same thing. It's like you need far less money than you think you do. And I'd tell people just 5 to 7 good private money lenders or hard money lenders or partners. That's
Yep.
all you need to make yourself incredibly wealthy. I
Yep.
go to a lot of networking events and I've talked to a lot of investors with gray hair on their head who've been through several market cycles,
Yep.
and they just found a few people they work really well together with, and then they refer some of their friends. And so it's great
That's
you have
right.
a list of 100 people, right? But you're never going to take money from 100 people all at once.
Nope.
It's never going to happen unless you're doing some big commercial fund or something.
Right.
And so, man, I would tell everybody, one, you don't need as much money as you think you need, and two,
That's
you
right.
don't really need a lot of money to get started, and three, a lot of times the money is already around you. It's already people you know, it's people at your church. There's probably $1 million or more in your phone. You don't
Yep.
realize it
Oh
in your
my
contacts.
gosh. Definitely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Probably way more than that, actually. You're
Yeah.
selling yourself short.
Yeah, exactly. And so what I like to tell people when they're raising private money is like, you are not, I like what you said. If they ask one question, then you didn't do a good job at a presentation. I like that. So you give them all the information they need to make a decision. But I also like to kind of suss out, and you can't ask them this directly, but I also like to try to figure out, are you solving a problem for them with their money? Are they letting it sit in a CD or checking account? Do they not like the stock market? Did they just cash in a bunch of precious metals? Did they just sell
Yeah.
something? Do they have a
Yeah.
bunch of money in a retirement account they want to diversify? And so if you're not solving a problem for them by borrowing their money or bringing them in on your project, then you're probably not going to raise a lot of money from them either. Because I know someone who is very flush in cash, but he manages his own money in the stock market, and makes really good returns. And there's
Yeah.
no way that I could ever solve a problem for him because he solved his own problem because he does it full time. So
That's right.
look for like a problem to solve when you're also raising money as well.
Yep.
Um, and so I wanted to also ask, what does your business look like today? Obviously, you said you're not doing pop tops, you're not doubling the
Mm-mm.
livable square feet on houses anymore. So, what does your business look like today, Keith?
It's very different than what it was. So for the first 4 years of my real estate investing career, I was active duty in the Marine Corps, and therefore the only thing that I did was wholesales. I just assigned everything. I did not have the capability of raising money, getting contractor crews, dealing with change orders, renovating houses, project management, things like this. However, when I got out of the Marine Corps in 2020, that is when I started doing renovations. And for the next 4 years, from 2020 until 2024, I was just greedy. I took down every single house. I did not assign at all, not even, maybe I accidentally wholesaled like one or two during those 4 years, but everything else, we flipped ourselves. We wholesaled, we retailed, we wrapped, whatever it was, we're taking title because that's where the money is, right? So I thought. However, going into last year, 2024, the market was really weirding me out. Like a little bit of a stalemate. Days on market was extending. Interest rates was going up. Frankly, it was harder to buy and it was harder to sell. I saw everything slow down, and it made me really weird because I had never experienced that market since I started in 2016. And I said, I don't really want to get into any of these big renovations anymore because I think that the market may go down. And even if it doesn't, if it stays, if it plateaus where it is, my holding costs are going to eat me alive. Time kills all deals. And if I'm paying 10 or 12% on interest rate, all these holding costs, a renovation is always going to go over budget. It's always going to take a little bit longer than you think it's going to, or you think that it should. These things are the norm. And so I've just come to expect it. And I look at these projections and I say, I don't really want to get into this, get caught with my pants down, over leveraged on all of these houses if the market, collapses. And so I stopped, and I've kind of gone back to my old roots of, revenue in first position, fast money comes first. Let's wholesale and novate. And so that's the majority, I would say 80 to 90% of my business last year, and even the beginning of this year, has been wholesale and novations. And I am doing some rentals as well right now. But what does it look like when it comes to my team? Well, we have 4 people, including me. I have Miss K, who is our lead manager. She's been on the team for 4 years. I have Xavier, who's helping me with the acquisition. He's the acquisition manager. I have Mel, who's our transaction coordinator. And then I'm operating as the disposition manager. So the 4 of us basically take it from lead to close, no matter the exit strategy. We'll wholesale, we'll retail, we'll wrap, we'll rent, we'll lease option, we'll novate, we'll whatever else is out there. I've done all of those things, but primarily right now, we're focused on revenue in first position. Fast money comes first. We need to look at it from an assignment position first, a novation position second, and then kind of the others are all tied depending on are we going to flip this? Are we going to owner finance this? Are we going to hold it as a rental? These are all going to take substantially more time than a wholesale.
But priority 1 is to assign.
That's correct.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And you're doing that nationwide now?
Almost 34 states. There's a couple, I actively invest in 34 states. There's a couple states that are really stupid, that I don't like their laws, and I don't like how they conduct themselves, and I refuse to do business there anymore. I used to do all 50 states, but then there's some states that you just have a statistical improbability of flipping a good house in freaking Idaho or Alaska, right?
Brother, you're fine. 34 states. I'm calling it nationwide. Okay, I'm just going to call it nationwide. You're good. You're good. So you're doing nationwide wherever the numbers make sense.
Everything is virtual. I haven't been to many of the states in which we've flipped houses in.
Love it. I love it. And how are you generating leads today?
Great question. Also, the first 4 years is there's like a bisection in my career where the first 4 years it was all outbound marketing. So I was doing text message, ringless voicemails, cold calling, direct mail, bandit signs, newspaper ads, driving for dollars, door knocking, like you name it, all of those things. I have put hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars into that. And then if you remember, I started in Virginia and then I moved to Hawaii. Well, I loved living in Hawaii. Hawaii was absolutely wonderful. There was one small hiccup, and that I was young, white, and in the military, which are the 3 things that they don't really like in Hawaii. And so I found it more difficult to be buying houses there. And so I ended up, that's when I started going virtual, and I started doing things in the continental United States while I was living in Hawaii. And it was exceptionally expensive to scale multi-metros with outbound marketing. And so I went to inbound marketing, and then I started only doing PPC. And for the next 4 years, that's what I did, exclusively PPC on Google Ads. And that was amazing. It was super cheap, cost per lead. It was high quality. People are coming to me. I'm converting 1 in 12, 1 in 15. It was really good. Now we have a split between PPC and PPL, so pay-per-click and pay-per-lead. I found that to be really good. I'm sort of an emotional being, and so when things are really good, I get super hyped up, and then when things are crappy, I get really upset. And so rather than being on this emotional roller coaster, I found it better to have 2 or 3 different streams. So I had 2 PPC managers and 1 PPL manager. And what this means is that they all kind of average each other out. If one of them happens to have a bad month, statistically, the other 2 are either having a good month or an okay month. And so it really leveled out the lead quality as well as the lead quantity.
Wow. I love how you built your business around yourself. It seems like you really know yourself,
Yeah. I didn't when I started, though, admittedly. I ran through the roller coaster, and it was just emotionally exhausting until I realized, dude, what? I don't have to do this. There are things that you can do. It's called diversification. Any real, investor who's read a book knows what diversification is. It took me far too long to figure out, hey, I can add some additional but similar and complementary lead sources to what I'm already doing that will just far outweigh the cost of doing that.
And so what do you, if you know your KPIs right now, you said how you find a deal, you do PPC and PPL, is that right?
Yep, that's correct.
And What do you know what your cost per contract closed is roughly these days?
Yeah, I know exactly what it is. It's 1503 this month.
$1,503 per
Correct.
contract close. Wow, you really know your numbers, Keith. I'm impressed with that.
Yeah, I track them. We've built in a super advanced KPI tracker. I built my own CRM, and in that CRM we built an amazing KPI tracker. And I follow. There's a book called Traction. It's Entrepreneur Operating System, EOS model. Heck yeah, you got it, dude. I literally have a box of them in the corner of my room, and every person who I invite over for dinner. It's an amazing book. If anybody, that's going to be my book recommendation. Gino Wickman is an absolute stud. Just to
Love
put
Gino.
in just to put in a plug, he essentially went to all the Inc. 500 companies, and it took him somewhere between 10 to 15 years to go to every one of their C-suite executives and interview them. And he found these are the things that really work within their companies. Now, everyone has their own spin, their own style of doing something, but they all have the same fundamental principles. He distilled them down into what he writes in that book. And so one of those things is a level 10 meeting. And every Tuesday we have an all hands meeting. All four of us get together, and every single day, not every single day, every single week we go through our KPIs, and we have targets and we have red flags. And if anybody's below a red flag, then they get yelled at publicly. If anybody is in the green, then they get props, they get kudos publicly. And so some of the things that we track are like, what is your speed to lead? How quickly from the time the lead comes in, what is your median speed to lead for the last week, for the last month, quarter to date? And we track these things. What about big checks, which is just a fancy way that my company measures like, are you calling every lead every day? If you call every lead every day, then you get a big check for today. Well, what is your average big checks? You should get 5 per week if you're doing your job. There's 5 working days in a week. Therefore, your average should be 5. Well, you're going to be sick, you're going to go on vacation. And so the threshold for firing is 4.5. So everybody had better have an average of 4.5 big checks. And what does this really lead to? It leads to consistency, right? If you think speed to lead is like intensity. Think about this in a workout. You have there's 3 fundamental things that you're going to train. One of them is intensity, one of them is consistency, and one of them is duration. And what I mean by that is if your workout is a walk, like I'm not saying that's bad, but I'm just talking about intensity. It's not very intense. You're not really going to be working your muscles. Or if you walk, but the duration is 20 hours of walking, you're definitely that's a good workout, right? And then the other one is consistency. Well, if we only do it one day a year, you're not really doing that much for your body. And so you have to have a blend of intensity, consistency, and duration. This is the same exact. Again, these are principles that you can apply into your business. The intensity, how quickly are we getting to the lead? The duration, we call it crazy ex-girlfriend, meaning we call, if you don't pick up, hang up.
Please, please tell me how you came up with crazy ex-girlfriend.
Yeah, think about this. Call, if they don't pick up, hang up. Call, if you don't pick up, hang up. Call, if they don't pick up, leave a voicemail and send them a quick text message. Do that every day for 7 days, and you will see that you will connect with 90% of your leads, plus or minus 2. Any data point. I know my KPIs. I've got this stuff locked on. If you look at,
so you call them 3 times, and then after the 3rd time, you leave them a voicemail and you shoot them a quick text.
Correct, and you do that for 7 sequential days. So it ends up being 21 dials. And really it's 23, because what we end up doing on day 1 when they submit the lead, it's 3, and then we wait 30 minutes, and then it's 2 voicemail text message. So it's 23 dials across 7 days at 8 different times, 8 different voicemails, 8 different text messages. Michael, if they don't pick up the phone, they are a waste of time. They are not a lead that you are going to convert. However, if there's any viability in this lead, 90%. You will have a 90% plus or minus 2. I don't care if you look at my weekly average, my monthly average, my quarterly average, my yearly average, last year's average. For years, we've been tracking this stuff, and it's always been minus plus or minus 1. The lowest that I've ever been is 89% lead connection rate. The highest I've been is 91% lead connection rate. And so
after 7 days, if you don't make contact, do you just take it out of rotation, you don't have a drip sequence, you put it on the back
No,
burner?
then we have a very elaborate, comprehensive follow-up sequence that they go on with ringless voicemails and text messages and emails.
How long is that secondary sequence
Five
before?
years.
5 years. Wow. That is thorough.
It's intense.
I did a lot of direct mail in the past, and I've had people call me from a direct mail piece 2 or 3 years later, but I don't think I've ever had a 5 year follow up on anything I've done.
Yeah, so well, the same thing is true for me. To my knowledge, nobody's ever gone past the 4 year mark, but regularly we get people 3 years after. You know what? I lied just now. We're buying a house that the lead, I don't know what month it was, but it was 2021 was when the lead came in. Regularly, people are like we're going to buy at least one house per month from a long-term follow-up sequence. Long-term being defined as greater than 365 days from today's date.
Wow.
One deal per month comes from absolutely free because we paid for it more than 1 year ago. Anyway, so 1503 is our cost per, we call it cost per deal, cost per close contract, whatever. Same
So
thing.
your cost per deal is a little over $1,500, and then what's your average exit? I guess, which is usually an assignment. So I guess what's your average assignment fee?
$18,400.
$18,400. Well, I can't even do the math on that, but that is like more than a 10x. Yeah, that's more than a 10x return. Keith,
Which
you really,
realistically, anything that is more than 6x is healthy. Anything greater than 8x is like ultimately scalable. And then 10x is like the epitome. That's what we're shooting for. Now, what I just said sounds really sexy, and I don't want there to be any misconstruing of data, because you can make data look any which way, especially when you're kind of nerdy like I am. What we're talking about is ROAS, return on ad spend. What it doesn't count is all of the costs in my business, right? So yes, my ROAS, I am only putting in $1,500 and I'm getting back $18,000, but then I have to pay my lead manager, I have to pay the acquisition manager, I have to pay the transaction coordinator, I have to pay for the marketing, I have to pay for the taxes, I have to put money aside for the war chest, I have my tech stack, I have all this crap.
right.
That expenses out. So I just wanted to
Yeah.
be
So
overly
that's
transparent.
like gross. That's like revenue. That's not your net.
That's
And
correct.
so, but someone who's newer likely won't have those kind of expenses. For example,
No,
the
none of
first
them.
the first deal I did from direct mail, I was thrilled at my return, and I believe it was like I spent. God, I got to go back and look at the numbers, but I think it was close to like $1,500 or $1,800 in direct mail that I spent to get something under contract. And when it was said and done, when the property was stabilized, I had $55,000 in equity. So I was
Nice.
just thrilled on that return, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had very little overhead. I was doing everything myself. I was the acquisitions manager. I was doing the marketing. I was going on the sellers' appointments, locking it up. I raised the private money.
Yep.
I was like my own GC, finding subcontractors to do all the work, which I don't
Yeah.
recommend anybody
Nope.
do.
Neither do I.
And I was working a full-time job and traveling while I was doing
Wow.
that.
Wow.
Someone who's newer probably won't have all the same overhead as you, but so you said anything 6x on your ROAS, on your return on ad spend, you said around 6x is considered healthy or viable. Would you say that number is true for like a newbie that doesn't have a lot of overhead? Is 6x what they should target?
Yeah. So 6x is, in my opinion, you're breaching on a healthy, and again, this is ROAS, not true ROI of the business. Okay.
Right.
When it comes to specifically what I'm talking about, and only what I'm talking about is ROAS. 6x, you're breaching on healthy, and like I have a lot of data points to prove this. We've had more than 400 people go through REI Automated, and we track absolutely everything to include ROAS. And I'm here to tell you that people struggle at 5x. It's unhealthy. Can you make it? Yes. When you're newer, when you have a less overhead, when you have maybe a W-2 job that's supplementing this income, can you survive at 5x? Yeah, you can even survive really at 4x, but I can absolutely guarantee you, if you have 3x below, your business is going to die. If you continue at that pace, it is unsustainable, and 100% of the people less than 4x, if it's 3.99, you're going to die.
Wow. So the solopreneur can't go any lower than that.
No, it's not. It's not sustainable unless, again, the biggest caveat is if you have supplemented income from your W-2 or existing rental properties or something like this, fine. You can, truthfully, you could have a negative ROAS if this is throwing enough cash into it. So that aside, if we are relying on this to feed our bodies and our household, keep a roof over our head, keep our wives and kids happy, you need to have 6x for it to be healthy.
Yeah, most of the real estate investors that I talk to and that I know in my network, when they started, they had a full-time job as well.
Yep.
And I've almost, so somebody told me this, and so I love to repeat it. Hitting like a home run on your first deal when you're a newbie and you have a full-time job, I was told it's almost like a curse.
Yeah, you get spoiled and it sets your expectation to be something totally unrealistic. That's right.
Yeah, you 10x your first one, and you're like, wow, they all must be like this. Well, I haven't been doing this my whole life. Let
This
me do
is so
10.
easy. Let me quit my job right now. No, stop. Don't, please.
Exactly. So yeah, when you're doing it part time, you're just getting started. You have a full time job. You have a partner or your spouse works. Yeah, you can. I don't know if I should be setting the bar this low, but it's like my goal for somebody new on their first deal is how about we do a deal, and if we make $1, we're gonna celebrate it. With somebody new. I don't know. My
Yeah.
opinion on that might change over time, but it's like a private lender told me this once. He said, before we talk about return on investment, let's talk about return of my investment. And
Mm-hmm.
I've had a private lender tell me, like,
Mm-hmm.
as long as my principal is not harmed, they're considering it a win. And it's like,
Yeah.
somebody told me this early on. I forget who. I need to start crediting people properly for these things, but they're like, if you did everything right and ethically, and you worked and you did the best you can, and other things interfered, and I just get my principal back, I'm still doing business with you. That's how
Yeah.
a seasoned private lender told me that in the past. I
Yeah.
was like, wow, that's one way to look at it.
Yep.
So I don't want new people to hear this and talk about, I've had a deal where I've exited like 115,000 off of like 17 grand invested. You've had some real big home runs because we're out there doing it. We put ourselves in a position to win, and that does not mean your first deal can or will do it, because at least on
Yeah, that's
my
right.
side, it might be different for you, Keith, but for me, when I had those big wins, I didn't know it was going to be a six-figure win. I just knew the deal worked. And
Yeah.
you kind of don't know those final numbers until we're coming to the end of the deal, right?
Yeah.
And so for anybody listening who thinks that like my first deal has to be a six-figure win, I would just tell them, like, we knew.
Totally. You're setting yourself up for failure, frankly. If you
That's
have that
right.
expectation, you're going to fail that expectation
That's
statistically.
right. That's right. Like, our goal is to safely get a return and hit whatever our markers are. Like, I've made six figures on a deal. That doesn't mean every deal I touch has to be six figures.
Yeah.
And so, how are you funding your deals today?
Trick question, because most of them are assignments.
That's right.
So no money is needed at all. I do have some rentals right now, and so what I'll do is I'll take them down. I will acquire them with private money. I will renovate them with private money, and then I will do a cash out refinance with a DSCR lender. That's what I'm doing with my rentals. Now, if I were to take, I just finished a humongous renovation, $105,000 renovation. I don't plan on doing any more renovations. I'm kind of a little bit sick of them right now. I need a recoup still. But if a smoking deal were to come across my desk right now, then 100% my answer is private money. I haven't used hard money since 2000 and I think 2018, 2019 was the last time that I used hard money. Ever since, I've been using private money because it's just so much simpler, and you don't have to auction off your firstborn son as collateral when you're dealing with private money like you do with hard money. You have to just give away everything if you screw up with hard money, and I don't like that.
Yeah, I found things simpler with private money too. My first deal was with private money, and I bumped into it unintentionally, my first private lender,
No kidding.
and I've used private money. I haven't used hard money as of yet, but I like to tell new people, it's like, if the deal works, the money will find you.
That's exactly right.
It doesn't matter if it's hard money or private money. In fact, if you're new, I kind of think hard money is the right way to go. because they hold you really accountable. They usually do what's called draw
Yep.
inspections. And so a typical deal, like just to make it simple for the audience, let's say a rehab is 30 grand, right? Even though most rehabs are higher than that these days. If let's say a rehab is 30 grand, you're going to spend 10,000 on the first third of the deal. They're going to send an inspector out to make sure the work was done right.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're going to get a draw. The lender, the hard money lender, is going to give you the next 10 grand. Then they're going to do an inspection, the next 10 grand. And so when you're new, you don't know what you don't know. And
Yep.
so I've
They
seen
actually protect
people,
you.
yeah, and I've seen people do like they don't want to pay the extra like $100 or $150 for the draw inspection, so they'll do one big draw because they have a bunch of cash. And then you get to the finish line, the draw inspector goes out here and is like, "Hey, half this stuff is done wrong,"
Mm-hmm.
and
Or
it's
not done at all.
or not done at all, maybe. Yeah. And so it is cheaper, much cheaper to do things right the first time than it is to go back and fix them. So new people should not be afraid of using hard money.
Yeah.
In fact, it's going to teach you how the business should be done right. And it also gives you great, when you're talking to contractors, you can be like, "Hey, I'd love to pay you, but the hard money lender won't pay me until these two things are done. So get back out there and do them, and then we'll get the
Yep.
next chunk of money, and then I can pay you." But when you do with a private lender, depending on how you structure it, I've had a private lender just fund the purchase, and then I funded the rehab out of my own pocket. And then I've had
Mm.
private lenders that have funded the purchase and the rehab. Every private lender is different. Some of them don't want to fund the rehab. Some of them would love to, but they don't have the cash at the time. And so everybody is different. But for someone new, man, do not be afraid to use hard money. I haven't used hard money yet because I've just found so many great private money lenders. But starting out, I was okay with hard money. It's just I just so happened to have already had a private money lender in my network when I found the deal. And I was
Mm-hmm.
just flying my flag, showing everybody this great deal I found, and private money came to me. But yeah, do not be afraid to use hard money in the beginning. So you're mostly you're funding your marketing from your assignments and your revenue from your business, and you're not really using money to fund deals right now.
No.
Um, and so then I was going to ask, how do you exit deals? But you answered that almost all of them are assignments or you novate.
Correct.
And then are you using an in-house transaction coordinator or using?
Yep. I've trained my own transaction coordinator. He's been on the team now for almost 3 years, and it's I wouldn't recommend if you're starting off doing this because you don't know what the heck you're doing. So how in the world can you train somebody to do anything, and how can you uphold a high standard? So paying for an outside third party transaction coordination company who knows what they're doing and will help you. That's what I recommend. I have used those in the past. That's actually how I started. That's actually how I got many of the blueprints and the documents and the outlines and the SOPs that I have now. Was using a third party transaction coordination company, and then once it became such a huge, if you're paying $800 to $1,000, even $1,200 for these transaction coordination companies to come in and do a deal, but then I can hire somebody from the Philippines, pay them $4 per hour plus $250 per transaction as a bonus. Hello, that's way freaking cheaper. And if you're doing multiple deals per month, this adds up to a pretty substantial amount at the end of the year. So once it became such a huge opportunity cost that I couldn't stomach it anymore, I let the third party transaction coordination company go. I vetted 700 people through a 3-part vetting process and interview process to boil it down to 3 winning transaction coordinators. And then, funny enough, I have nobody might. You don't know this when I hire you, but I basically give you a completely unreasonable amount of work. It would take maybe 3 to 4 weeks for you to accomplish, and then I tell you you have 1 week to finish it. It's designed to fail. It's impossible to do. And 2 of them quit because they're like, if this is what he's expecting, I cannot work with this person. And the other guy had a great attitude. He had constant communication. Hey Keith, I'm this part done. I still have all of this left. Looks like I'm a little bit behind, I'm not to the end of the week yet, but do you mind if I have a little bit of extra time? I'll work through the weekend and make so like one of them just showed exemplary leadership, exemplary communication, and he didn't quit. He didn't have a bad attitude, where the other two dropped off nearly immediately, day 3, day 5 or so. And to
That's
this
amazing.
day, that guy is still with me, and he's a
That's amazing. Yeah,
star player.
I learned that in corporate America from building and working with big teams. You can train a lot, but you can't train attitude, you can't train
Mm-hmm.
personality. And so you're probably like me, I don't really hire for the skill set, that's a factor, but
Yeah.
I can teach you how to do anything, but I can't teach you to have a good attitude or be
Yeah.
motivated or having interpersonal skills or communication. I can't teach that.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for the things I can't teach. We can figure out the rest together.
Right.
So I love that. I think it's great when you're new. I would just kind of caution new people on this. Every state is different, and so when you are doing nationwide wholesaling or you're investing out of the state you're in, you should really use a third party transaction coordination company. They're everywhere. Get a recommendation. I like to steal phrases from other people, but they say rock stars know rock stars. And so I
Mm-hmm.
would talk to a rock star investor in the market that you're in, or a rock star realtor, or somebody like that, and ask who their TC or their transaction coordinator is.
Shoot,
And
I'll
I'll,
give you one.
and Keith will give you one too. If you guys want to message Keith on social media and message him the market you're in and what TC you need, him or someone on his team will get back to you.
Yeah.
And but until you bring it in house, you need to do a lot of volume. And I still use a third party company. And so it's you got to start that way. Don't you we used to use the phrase "don't trip over dollars to pick up pennies." You know, if you've done
Yes.
hundreds of transactions like Keith has, you can bring it in house, especially if you already know the markets. But first time investor or first time in a new market, you got to use a seasoned professional, even if it costs a couple bucks more in that market. The next question we got there is I wanted to ask you, like, what does real estate give you the freedom to do? But I think you kind of answered that already with your children and your time and being there for your family.
Yeah. Well, let's turn it into really practical. Right now, this is my last thing for today. We just picked up my wife's cousin. We are going to hang out the whole weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Last weekend, I took Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday off. Me and my son went on a camping trip. We were hunting in the woods, just me, him, and a friend. And uh, I get to spend time with my family. Today's Valentine's Day.
It
And
is.
so I have some flowers for my daughter because next week, I got her a little card here. Next week, I'm inviting her to our first daddy daughter ball. And
Aw.
so I just got done with a trip with my son, and I'm gonna have a trip with my daughter. And like that's really what it has allowed me to do. That's been my intent from the very beginning. Was I actually chose to start the business? I didn't share this story in 2016. When I started the business, I had two choices essentially: start the business or and pay for. I signed up for a very, 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 very the most expensive real estate investing program that has ever existed in the nation. And I put that on credit cards, and I had been building my credit score. Well, why was I building my credit score? Because we knew that we were pregnant. And so for like 6 months, 7 months, I had been working on my credit score, brought it from 555 to 798 and was doing amazing. And the reason why I was doing that was so that we could buy a house because we were in this teeny tiny little 1 bedroom, 1 bath, 600 square foot apartment on the third story and all these steps, right? And I was like, golly, we're starting a family. Like my wife's gonna be pregnant. I can't imagine her lugging up all this gear and stuff with a child up it's actually 6 flights of stairs. Um, and so we were gonna buy a house. Well, I ended up not buying that house. And I ended up paying for this real estate investing education. Why? To risk it on myself. I was betting on myself to come out on the other side victorious. Why? So that I could spend time with my kids.
Yeah, that's very powerful, Keith. You know, my first investment that I used, similar motivation, instead of loading myself up with debt for a primary residence for a home, my first deal was a house hack, and my thought was
Yes,
the
sweet.
same way. It's like, if I'm gonna go out there and work for something, like, I want something that's gonna pay me back, and so we did a house hack on our first deal, and that
Nice.
changed how my mind worked,
Yep.
because how I was thinking from the W-2, from the corporate America mindset, is I work as hard as I can to get the highest salary I can, to get the nicest house and the nicest car that I can. And then once you learn about how, like, debt to income ratio works, and once you learn how credit scores work, and you're like, uh-oh, I can only
I
leverage
can only borrow
myself
so
on
much.
my yeah, I can only leverage so much debt on myself. I was like, why would I do it for, like, a house that I'm gone when I'm working most of the time? So I got a house hack with the intention of, like, if I could just subsidize and pay like half my mortgage, that would be great. But
Hmm.
what it turned into, like most real estate investments, is it was like the value came in higher, the mortgage is being paid down every month, and then the rents went up over time. And so, like, within less than a year, I was living for free. And my
Hmm.
intention was just to pay half my mortgage. And it's like, you're living for free, and you're like, wow, how
Yeah.
powerful is this? So I took that
Yep.
money and I invested it into something else. Like, I agree. A lot of people disagree with this, but I believe a primary home is not an investment. You know, lots of people talk about that, including Robert Kiyosaki. And so a house
Hmm.
hack is an investment, a rental property is an investment. The education you invested in was an investment. And so I encourage people that if you're young and you're just getting out there, don't go buy a nice big new construction home with the
Yeah.
maximum. And the system, I tell people this all the time, Keith, the system is designed for you to spend as much money as you can.
That's
And
right.
so the
It's called a
first,
mortgage. Do you know what mortgage means?
what's that?
A death note. That's what it means in Latin. You
Death
will
note.
pay this. You will pay this note until you're dead. It's a death note. That's what
Wow.
mortgage literally means in Latin. I think that
Wow.
it's Latin. Now somebody's gonna freaking fact check me, and I have to freaking Google this.
All right, everybody, everybody, put in the comments if Keith is right or wrong. You know, everyone, go to Keith's social media right now and either say you're right, Keith, or you're wrong, Keith.
The
Everyone,
term,
tell him.
oh, it does. The term mortgage comes from the Latin word mortus, which means dead. The word mortgage can be thought of as a death pledge because the loan dies when the borrower pays all the payments or defaults on the loan.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
it
morbid.
is Latin. Death. It's a death pledge, a death note.
And so I
There you go.
realized how the system worked when I was trying to buy my first house hack. Is like, the lender gives you a pre-approval for however many dollars, and when you go talk to an agent, I had a number in my head. I was shopping. This was, I don't know, 8 years ago, and I didn't really care where I lived, but I was like, I don't want to spend more than $100,000 on a house. $100,000 on a house. Today, $100,000 house is hard to find where I live. I know they're still in the U.S., but it's hard to find in Houston now. And I remember, like, when I talked to a realtor and I was like, I want to buy a house for $100,000. Like, do you have a pre-approval? Yes, ma'am, I do. Can I see it? And you show it to him, and it said, I forget what it said, like 400 grand. And she's like, okay, I'm going to send you some $100,000 houses, but I'm also going to send you some 400 and like $30,000 houses. I said, I'm only approved for 400. She's like, yeah, but if you see something that you like, sometimes the lenders can extend it a little bit. And I was just like, whoa, okay, I do not want to spend 400 grand on my first home, because I already had a plan to be an investor. But the system was designed because realtors and mortgage officers get paid based on the size of the loan or the size of the deal they do. So I quickly saw that, like, the system was what it felt to me was like, when you go shopping for a car, when you go shopping for a house, when you take out a credit card or student loans, they're solving towards how much of your income can we lock up for the next 10,
Hmm.
20, 30 years.
It's all
So
about the payments. It's not about the price. It's about the payments.
that's right.
Americans buy on payments,
That's
which
right.
is terrible, and it gets you. Think about the matrix, and it keeps you stuck in the system.
Yeah, and what it really does to me is it removes value. You start to understand value less.
Hmm.
And so you're not saying, am I buying a $100,000 house for 50 grand or 75 grand or whatever it is, or if I'm paying 100,000 for a $100,000 house, you start solving towards, can I afford the payments? So
Yeah.
that was really my experience when I bought my house hack. So I'm just so fortunate that I had education before I went out there, went house shopping. But that's not the end of the world. If you already own a house and a car, there's other ways of getting into real estate. I mean, I go to networking events all the time, and 55, 60-year-old guys come in the room and say, okay, I'm ready to start investing. And we find strategies that work for them too. But I wish I could talk to people in their teens and early and mid 20s, and it's like, dude, before you do this, I know
Yeah.
you want a big house. I know you want to live like. Another problem I find is people are trying to live like their parents. They think
Yeah.
that's what success
Times
is.
have changed a lot.
Yeah, and they want to live like their parents. And one, like if your parents are in their 50s and 60s, like they didn't start how you see them today. They might have
Yep.
been hustling when you were a baby or before you were born.
Yep.
And typically, I forget what the statistic is, but I think it was like every 7 years we like trade. So we signed a 30-year mortgage, but every 7 years we're like
Yeah,
trading
it
up
is.
in
It's 7 years.
houses. Yeah. So every 7 years we're trading up in house. So when you look at your parents' life, I've seen kids that when they graduate college and get their first job, they're like, all right, I need an SUV, I need a big house. And then when they're leveraged to the hilt and they can't breathe, then they're like, okay, let's start investing, let's start
Dude,
saving, let's fund our retirement
even
accounts.
even still, I'm gonna get really vulnerable here. Me and my wife, we've been together for 13 years. We've been married for 11. We have 2 kids. I We're a single car family in a nice Toyota Highlander, of all things. Mommobile, yeah. We live in like a 300 and something $1,000 house. Basic as all basic gets. That I'm not telling anybody what you should do, because there's no right or wrong way of doing life. It's going to be right and left, and what is different, you know, you're going to do something differently in your season of life depending on where you are, how old you are, what's happened to you in your past. But what I am saying is there's a problem in America of people with a consumerism attitude of you don't need 2 cars. I'm literal living proof that we have 2 kids, both in extracurricular activities, one vehicle. We've had one vehicle since we did have 2 vehicles for a very short period of time. I'm talking less than 2 years of our marriage. We had 2 vehicles, but we
And
were a
Keith,
one car family.
you're in a position where if you wanted a second vehicle, you could buy it in cash tomorrow, right?
Yes. I and live in a nicer house. And it's like, dude, what and again, I'm going to preface with my way is not right, and I'm not saying somebody who's doing the opposite of me is wrong. I'm not judging anybody, and again, what is right for me, maybe even wrong for you. There is no right or wrong. It is just simply right or left. But what I am stating is that people often will look at all these shiny objects and they'll go after the payments. Oh, I can afford the payments, therefore I need this thing. And so what I would tell you, earlier you said, Michael, I took it as a bit of a compliment. You said, you really know yourself. And so my question to anybody who's listening to this is, do you really want that? Of all the things in your life, is that what you need most? And if not, that doesn't align with your goal, find out what your goal is. And anything that doesn't align with your goal is a distraction from your goal. And it will prevent you from hitting your goal if you go after this thing for too long.
I love that, Keith. Yeah, me and my wife, we live kind of like how you guys do. Like this house that I'm in right now was originally going to be a rental. I got it from doing direct mail off market. I got it for a really
That's
great
dope.
price. And yeah, I got it for a really great price. And first it was going to be a rental. And then we did the numbers and we're like, okay, time for us to move out of our house hack and live by ourselves because we're going to have kids eventually. We still haven't had kids. And so I live in a nice suburb area after living in an older, rougher community for years. I now live in the suburbs, and my mortgage is half of what my neighbor's is because I bought my house so cheap off
Mm-hmm.
market. And
Mm-hmm.
then our cars, like I love what you said about it. We have 2 cars, but my wife's car is 11 years old and my car is 12 years old. They're paid
Yep.
off.
Yep.
We
Great.
we put money
That's so
into
great.
them and do repairs, and we're gonna stretch them out as far as they can go. They're not gonna last forever.
Yeah.
And so we've just lived like that, not because we had to, but because we had the choice to do it. And it's like wild when I talk to people at real estate meetups and they live in houses that are way bigger, way more expensive than mine. They have nicer cars than me. And then when I help them do the calculation of their number to hit financial freedom, they need way
Yeah.
more passive income than I do. So it is achievable. You can live the life that you want. It's just going to take more time to get you where you
And
need to
so
go.
much effort. It's
Yeah.
already going to take so much time and so much effort, but I'm here to tell you that things will always take longer than you originally anticipate, and they will always be harder than you originally think they will be. And so, if you know that going into it, why are you already going to make life harder for yourself?
Right, right. And so you mentioned it during during the talk, but what book changed the course of your life? I like to put
Yeah.
it in the end of the episode in case people are
Traction.
searching around. Traction.
Traction is one of my favorite books. It's in my top three books
Traction.
ever.
Awesome. And if you wanted to, what tip or trick made a huge impact on your business that you could share with our audience today?
The one thing that I'd like to submit to anybody, especially who is new right now, especially somebody who's new and who is at a W-2 job, is you're going to have so many naysayers and people who discourage you from your job, and it's because they're stuck in the matrix. You know, you have a steady secure job, you have health care and benefits and a 401k and all of this stuff. They're going to be your biggest naysayers. And so what I'd submit to you is that you need to be around people who are doing what you want to do right now. Just as we were talking about earlier in the very beginning, my very first deal, Michael asked me, "Did you have anybody who was popping the top on how?" No, I wish that I did. You need to surround yourself with a community of people who are doing what you want to do and who are who you want to become. Whether that's a virtual community or an in-person community, you need to surround yourself with folks who get it. And the more people you have around you, there's a quote that talks about you are the average of the five closest people, or the five people that you hang out with the most. Well, make all of those people not the naysayers, not the people. Even people in your family are going to be naysayers, right? Because what we're doing is very unconventional, and it is not the smart thing to do. It's insanely risky. Do you know how many people lose money on their flips and all this stuff? Yeah, I get it.
There was a study that I like to quote that was done. It was like when you pass away, they look at your net worth and they can average your net worth was the average of the five people you spent the most time around in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've even seen where people go and ask you for your phone and they open your recent calls, your contacts, and they're like the last five people you talked to. What's their net worth? What do they do for a living? What are they working on? And the guy was like, these people are going to guide where you end up in life. And
Yeah.
I went through that myself, where when I first discovered how entrepreneurship and real estate works, I'm talking to people and it's like I'm speaking a different language to them, and people either don't want you to succeed or they don't understand that it's possible for you to succeed. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think you really have to get around people that think differently. It's like when I first discovered this, who do we want to share it with? Our family, our
Yeah.
friends,
Yeah.
maybe our
They're going to be the
coworkers.
worst people to share
The
it with.
worst people, brother. They're the worst people to share. I'm telling you, they're the worst people. And so you need real friends, and I don't mean like real friends like since high school that you can trust. That's great. You can have those friends. But the real friends
Yeah.
that you need are people in the community. So networking is great. You can go to meetup.com. You can find
Always
uh
be the stupidest person in the room. If you can always be
always.
the stupidest person in the room and don't be afraid to ask dumb questions, right? The more questions, Tony Robbins says, the quality of your life is going to be in direct proportion to the level of questions you ask yourself.
I love that.
So we should do that. Like, let's implement that. Let's execute that. When we go into a room, don't be shy, don't be timid, don't be reserved. Ask questions. This is how everybody learns. We all start from nowhere with zero knowledge. And the only difference between you and Michael is he has asked far more stupid questions than you have to more people in more instances. That's the only difference, right? Is time and questions.
That's right.
And so that would be, yeah, get around
That's
good
right.
people, ask them tons of questions.
And there's also, you can do it virtually, like Keith mentioned. I have a free Facebook group. The link is in the description of all my social medias. I'm at Michael B. Someone or Michael Hoang on all social media platforms. You can find my free Facebook group. Keith, do you have a free Facebook group?
I do. It's called REI Secrets.
REI Secrets, awesome. Yeah, mine is called New Beacon, and so you can join these free Facebook groups, post your deals, post questions. We answer them. The community answers them.
Yep.
You would be surprised how many people are just dying to help you out there in the world, including me and Keith.
Yep.
And so for next up, I'm a big believer in the Go Giver. We read the Go Giver here. I love the Go Giver. I try to be a Go Giver everywhere I can. So I like to ask every guest, what can you give to our audience to be? What can you give our audience today?
Yeah. So I have prepared something really, really cool for your audience. And I think this is a wonderful thing. Thank you for asking this question because it gives me the opportunity to do something like this. So basically, I have a program where you have 12 courses. And I've selected 8 of those courses. 8 of them are pretty good as like an introductory thing. They're not super complex and getting the cart in front of the horse with advanced stuff. 8 of them are really good for people who are starting off, I would say, within their first 5 years, all the way down to the very person who literally doesn't know the difference between a condo, an apartment, a townhouse, or a single family house. So I have 8 of these courses, and I have a website for you to go to. You can select any one of these courses, and these are not some stupid, short, non-helpful, theoretical, non-executionary courses that you get for free. This was never meant to be a free course. This is one of the 12 courses that makes up my paid program, which I sell for a very large amount of money. You get to select one of those courses for absolutely free. There's no credit card. There's no sign up. You don't have to hop on a call with me. You're never pitched anything. It is my gift to you. I believe in serving people first. So I'm here to serve you, not to sell you. And I'll give Michael that link. He can put it probably below the podcast. You can go there, choose whatever course you want. We have a little tidbit about each course, and you can do a little bit of research. Choose the one that is going to help you and serve you the most. What is your core constraint? Solve that by going through one of these courses today.
That's awesome. So Keith is giving out a paid course for free. Pick whichever modules help you at whatever stage of your business that you're in. And so Keith is making that give to the audience today. And then in return, what can our audience give you?
So I am doing a very, very large initiative right now where I'm about going to 12x or so my current marketing budget. We're going to be buying a lot of houses in a specific region because there's a huge opportunity coming up. And I need some interns to man the phones, to triage some sellers, to structure some deals, to help me put properties under contract, maybe even dispose some, meaning sell the properties if we end up not buying them ourselves and holding on to them. I'm going to need some help. My current team is really small. There's just 4 of us, and we're looking to add 1 to 2 more people over the next 60, maybe at the most 90 days. So I'm looking for some people who that would be maybe a good opportunity and a good fit for.
That's awesome. And so anyone who wants to give their services to that or become an intern and learn more how they can grow with you, where can people find you?
The best place is going to be probably my LinkedIn profile. It's at Keith_Gillispie. In case this is an audio podcast, I don't actually know. Keith, Keith_Gillispie is Gillispie. That's my handle or whatever it's called on LinkedIn. Or you can just go directly to my website, www.rei, short for real estate investor, reiautomated.io. We have a little contact form that you can fill out there if you would prefer.
Awesome. And then do you have an Instagram?
I do have an Instagram. I don't know what my handle is, but I would imagine it's something like Keith Gillispie or REI Automated or Keith REI or something like that.
Awesome.
I'm terrible at social media, to be honest.
That's all right. You're too busy doing 3 careers.
Yeah, that's right.
So you can find Keith at any of those points of contact that he gave you. And then for me, I'm at Michael B. Someone on Instagram and all platforms and on YouTube as well. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to text me directly. I'm giving out my real number here, 832-301-9672. Again, if you call me, I won't answer. I get spam calls all day long. But if you just text me and mention the podcast, and then we can get on a call. Again, that's 832-301-9672. Keith, it has been great to have you here, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much. This was good.
I learned so much from this podcast, man. You got me fired up. I want to go out there and start marketing in a new market now.
Do it. I'll help you, bro. It's a lot of fun.
All right. Until next time, everybody, this has been the Be Someone podcast. So get out there today and be someone. Thanks, everyone.